Sekiro has left a hole in my heart since I completed it. Smooth, responsive combat with a variety of enemies, impressive boss fights, and a difficulty to match. So, when a Sekiro-like was announced by the current kings of Souls-likes, Koei Tecmo, I was immediately interested. But how does Wolong actually hold up? Well, they've definitely got the feel of it down. Smooth, reactive combat with some slight differentiations from Sekiro. Wolong makes it very clear that the best way to win fights is by using the core parrying mechanic, but offers alternatives if you are unable to get to grips and find the flow of parrying. Every basic attack can be blocked without you suffering any kind of damage. There is an exception to this rule, which are the critical attacks, which enemies will unleash here and there, but these are plainly obvious. If you see a red aura surround the enemy, then you know a critical is coming right for you. But even though you can't block them, the game offers another alternative in the form of a pretty effective dodge, which can send you flying away when you need it. Enemies can be tricksy though, where despite you being completely out of their range, they'll simply slide directly into range in order for their attack to hit. So timing is still critical in those dodges. These do give you plenty of options now though in how you end up facing your challenges. Perfect parrying attacks and going on the offensive, or repeatedly dodging and picking your moments more timidly. Of course, no matter which style you opt for, you'll still have to manage your spirit bar effectively, which is Wolong's equivalent of stance from Sekiro. Your spirit bar helps fuel your spirit attacks, your blocks, and your dodges. Once your spirit bar fills, your spirit will be broken and you'll be stunned for a period of time. Parrying attacks doesn't cause your spirit to increase, further lending that style of play to be the better, more aggressive one. But that doesn't mean spirit management is out of the question. You still have to keep an eye on it as you're attacking using your spirit attacks, which leads us smoothly on to how you'll be fighting your enemies. As I've already made plainly obvious, you fight enemies by defending, dodging, and parrying around attacks, and then attacking. Now, you can take the plain approach of just attacking repeatedly to try and deplete an enemy's health bar, but this is a much slower process than breaking their spirit. You deal spirit damage to enemies just by attacking them, but spirit gauges are filled far quicker when you deal spirit damage, either by using each weapon type's individual spirit attacks or by parrying. Utilizing parrying and spirit attacks is the best and most effective way to easily and quickly dispatch enemies, but is by no means the only way. And what do you have in your arsenal to dispatch these enemies? Well, Wolong offers a slew of weaponry to suit your preferred playstyle when fighting. A surprising arsenal of weaponry, in fact. Most of them are minor iterations of the same weapon. For example, you can find about 5 copies of the exact same twin blade throughout one level. But even without those endless copies to fill up your inventory, like some Warring States era dustbin man, there are polearms, twin blades, long swords, scimitars, great hammers, and so on, each having a unique playstyle attached to them. Depending on the kind of weapon you pick, it will also scale in damage and effectiveness based on your level in its respective virtue tree. Virtue is this game's equivalent of a leveling tree. There are 5 to choose from: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Each virtue offering a different buff when leveling. For example, earth offers more equipment load and better deflect, and wood raises your HP more and reduces how much spirit you lose when attacked. Each virtue also gives you access to wizardry and the respective virtue's wizardry tree. How much you use these spells is on you, as you can go the entire game without using a single spell from your respective wizardry tree, but they can come in useful in a pinch. Me? You think I've got time to cast spells whilst I'm parrying? Go play Hogwarts Legacy, bro. And then on top of the spells you also have access to the divine beasts, which you can acquire as you progress through the story. These are effectively one-time use Pokemon which recharge over time. They can damage enemies, debuff them, or buff you, all depends on what you need. I just took the AoE damage Pokemon to protect me in the tight situations. All of this ties together in a neat little bow. There's never too much given to you that you feel overwhelmed, and never too little that you feel like you're just coasting along without anything new happening. And when you get a little bit bored from the continuous main missions, the game also offers you side missions as you complete each individual level. And with combat, it's an absolute treat with a few minor annoyances. As mentioned, combat is fluid, fast, reactionary, and full of spectacle. Now, whilst this is a constant for every boss, only a couple bosses really fall below an exceptional grade. When you're presented with multiple enemies, maybe even 2 elites at the same time, that's when the game gets frustrating. Enemies are relentless with their attacks, constantly pushing forward to get one over on you, and if you're surrounded by them, Sure, parrying will connect no matter if you're facing an enemy or have your back to them, but holy god, keeping track of everyone coming at you at the same time is near on impossible. And the damn placements of some enemies. I get that they're ninjas, but hiding one behind a corner gets tiresome after the 10th time in the same level that I get jumped by one. And then it becomes the 10th time in each level after that? Please, get a new trick. And whilst bosses are a highlight of the game, every single one of them being memorable in some way or another, and only a couple times falling for tired, unenjoyable gimmicks, I can't say the same for basic enemy variety. The game feeds you a small array of enemy types for the first few levels, but then begins recycling them over and over from part 2 onwards. Enjoyable, challenging bosses keep you coming back, but repetitive enemy types drag the experience down more and more as you continue into the game. And this issue is highlighted even more when you take into account how the leveling and the confidence system works. So the aim of the game is for each level, you are taking back territory in an area from the enemy, from enemy control, and giving it to you. For every flag that you take control of, you boost morale, and that gives you additional confidence. By defeating more and more enemies, you also gain more confidence. Now, the confidence system at the start is a very neat way of making it more difficult for the player if they just speedrun and run through every enemy encounter. So you can no longer just run straight for the boss, use the boss's XP to level yourself up, and then pretty much leave yourself in the exact same position as you were at the start of the level for the next level. The confidence system makes it so that if you don't have the same confidence as the enemy that you are about to fight, you will take additional damage, they will hit harder, it will just in general be a lot more difficult. And that is good on paper. But when you're facing the exact same enemies, you get very, very comfortable with dealing with that same enemy over and over again. The same basic enemy in the first level will be the same basic enemy 10 levels onwards. And once you've gotten used to it, it becomes pure muscle memory. You come in, you block the first attack, you spirit attack, you block their critical, you parry that, and then you go straight in for the kill. It is that simple, which means you're not going to be taking damage and you're not going to be losing your confidence, which means you'll consistently be able to do more and more damage to all basic enemy types and then to even more elites as you progress through the level, making every level more and more of a chore the further into the game you get. It's frustrating, and I think the game even gets that, because when you get to the end game, you're not just fighting regular basic enemies over and over again. You're fighting about 5 basic enemies with 2 elites at the same time. It understands that it's lost all kind of imagination and is just throwing as much as it can at you to make it harder, which is a bit of a pity. But going back to bosses, what consistently lets them down for me is just the plain addition of mandatory companions. These companions are meant to be with you as they're part of the story, and are lending you a hand on that specific part to the story. During the main bulk of combat, at best, they're a good meat shield, and at worst, there are meat shields for the enemy as they block you from moving where you want to. In bosses, though, they make it so awkward to learn enemy patterns that you can sometimes double the amount of attempts needed to beat one, pulling aggro away from you as you're trying to parry their attacks, making it harder to read the boss's attack patterns, and even blocking you whilst you're trying to back away from the boss. Most of the time, they do more harm than good, and there's not a single way to get rid of them. I get what they were going for, a lonely hero traveling the land and acquiring the help of other heroes to help defeat the plague infecting the land. But the main protagonist is a mute, so that story beat doesn't land, and every comrade that joins the quest basically forces you to accept them on your quest without any question. Bosses, again though, despite being memorable, do suffer from the occasional sensory overload. Being a very parry-centric game, it's important to have full visual clarity with bosses so you know when and what to parry. Wo Long, unfortunately, goes a little too hard into the glamour and visual effects department. Some enemies have so many particle effects coming off them that it makes my PC chug like a steam engine, and makes me question whether or not I'm deflecting an attack or just some random shooting star. Whilst other enemies have so many limbs and appendages that the only way to tell when to parry is by guessing. These bosses are few and far between, but they stick out like a sore thumb as just being put there to pad time more than anything. These bosses are few and far between, but they stick out like a sore thumb as just being there to pad time more than anything. And that's my main problem. Despite the subpar performance which seemed to plague the mid to late game, that didn't stop me from playing way into the early hours of the morning. No. The one thing dragging Wolong down is simply being a tad over long. Bosses keep you coming back, but the repetitive nature of each level when you're simply going through the motions of taking enemy territory and fighting the exact same enemies over and over, it starts to drag after a while. The last few parts of the game are especially a drag when each level gets pumped with high-ranking elite enemies alongside regular enemies. But despite this, Wolong is still a great game. It doesn't quite reach the highs of Sekiro, but comes damn well close. Maybe a Wolong 2 could change that?